All right, hello everybody. Welcome to this week's Zoom. This would be, I think we've ended up getting to about a quarterly Zoom now. It seems like is where the community has been demanding of it. So we're going to be covering basically a lot of what we've been doing. This last cycle has been primarily a lot of architectural work and design implementations, tuning up, and testing. Right. So as far as like new feature build out, we haven't had an incredible amount of new features beyond getting what we've already had done working correctly, which is getting the mobile daemon running on the wallet, which was actually a huge thing. And Kendall can walk you guys through all of that. But what's really important about the mobile wallet is not just for the mobile wallet, but we discussed this last time that we're also, like you can build a module for the Nexus wallet, we're going to be doing something similar with our type of mobile development framework, so that basically anybody can package this node in with any different dApp that they're developing, whether it's a private dApp or running on the public network. And the eventual one will be, it'll be a very rapid development framework that you'll be able to develop mobile dApps directly onto your mobile phone. So instead of having this kind of dApp store and dApp directory and MetaMask and all this stuff, Nexus dApps are going to be standalone. They're going to be a standalone native app running either on Android or iOS or having a web interface. Most likely, they're going to have different points of access. If you think about a dApp is kind of like a house, right? It's just a big open space, right, with lots of interconnections. Now, the mobile wallet or a website or a desktop app are like different windows or different doorways into this house. So it's still a house, right? So we're presuming to see that like there most likely will be some dApps that are actually mobile exclusive, but this gives the developers freedom to basically give somebody access to create a mobile dApp or a desktop dApp or something that's running on your web browser too, and they'll all access the same type of ecosystem. So let's see, I'll give a bit of an update on what I've been, Paul and me, and Paul can go in a little bit more details on this. We've been actually spending a lot of time designing our new file system API, which this is a huge move in a way towards the operating system, but also for managing your files on Nexus. What it's basically going to be doing is allowing you to upload files directly into the API and then choose a storage mechanism such as IPFS or the LOD file system or a local storage mechanism. And then we're going to be handling a lot of the actual encryption and decryption with that. We found Paul actually came up with a really nice algorithm for storing your key and your state in your crypto object register, so you can change passwords and not have to rekey all your files and things like that. So the file system API has been a really big push forward, but there's been a lot of other prerequisites in that, such as we're developing or getting our API and HTTP LLP to support the full HTTP 1.1 protocol 1.1. Right now we support most of it, but we want to make this as clean as possible so that like you guys know with us, we do one thing that does multiple things. So getting this file system API to be uploading files into it, we have to support the HTTP 1.1 protocol, which also is going to go to essentially make your node able to basically host web services as far as SafeNet. So Paul can get a little bit more into details on that, but basically you'll be able to create a folder and you'll allocate this folder or distributed file system to be something that's associated with your, let's say, SafeNet service, right? And then it can have a TNS entry. And then just with the click of a button or the call of an API call, you'll be able to deploy that as a SafeNet service, right? So Nexus is becoming a lot more than just Nexus or a wallet or a daemon. It's really forming into a full new web protocol. And this file system API is really important to get there. And it's also a logical prerequisite to the LOD file system or the distributed file system like we were talking about. Because this is going to be your common interface into the file system, whether it's locally stored, remotely stored, anything else like that. So what I have been working on quite a bit more recently is, let's see. What I've been working on quite a bit more recently is the actual operating system architecture. So this has been, we've been kind of going between monolithic or microkernel type architectures, but basically what we're doing is we're settling on our initial deployment, right? Our initial operating system that we're working on. We've been working off of this one Nexus OS from some Cornell research professors, but it's a bit grimy too. So we're working on pulling pieces in that, but we're also looking at other types of microkernels, such as SEL4 and anything else like that. So basically what's happening is we're developing all these different components, I guess, because this is a new type of architecture in the way that we're doing it with the distributed computing. So there's been this huge debate between monolithic kernels and microkernels. And we're kind of going a little bit differently than current conventional operating system architecture, where you generally have this kernel space, and then you have a user space. And what ends up happening is the kernel is responsible for certain, like your threading, your memory management, your disk, things like that. On a monolithic kernel, that kernel does everything, like file system, all these other things. And the problem with that is, if you've ever noticed, like one thing goes wrong on your Windows computer and it just crashes, right? That's a symptom of a monolithic kernel, where everything is happening in this kernel space. So if anything bad happens to anything in that giant space, it breaks, right? And it crashes. So we're going to kind of like, I wouldn't say a microkernel. I mean, we're using the microkernel, but it's a bit more of like a microservice stack architecture, which is kind of interesting how it's been evolving, because each one of these different components of this operating system are basically going to be having a different space, at least by the current implementations and the current design. And this is basically going to be, how should I say, it's going to create a lot more redundancy and not just security, but it's going to make your computer much more stable, because when we're going to have each of these different components running in their own space, we're going to actually have Nexus be the authentication, what's required to actually get in and out, right? So this is going to be basically a protection mechanism. If you think about it, think of Nexus as kind of like your line of defense, where you're going to have to pass through Nexus to get to this kernel, right? So this is going to kind of act as like your first line of defense, where you're going to have to penetrate through Nexus in order to penetrate into your kernel space and cause any sort of malfunctions in there. And then behind that, there's going to be other microservices, instead of it being just one kernel, microkernel, and then everything else running in the user space, which is how conventional microkernel architecture works. This is going to be more of different microservices that kind of function to provide what the kernel does, but each in their own individual space. So it's going to be a lot more of a modular operating system, which is going to help with our scalability and also deployment strategies of improving the overall stability of it, and giving other people the ability to customize it a little bit more. So some of the basic components that we have is the microkernel, which, like I said, we're looking at different microkernel architectures. The L4 microkernel architecture is something that we're most interested in right now. SEL4 specifically, which is another type of kernel that's protecting, doing similar types of things, where you're attesting the logic and the movement of these things. But this is a slightly different, because what we're at least working on right now is this software-defined router, right? And this is a really core fundamental of this operating system, because every computer is going to be a router on this network. And as you guys recall, I was discussing about a stateless routing system. And so I've been working with Victor from Cisco and a few other people on the routing system. We also got in, we found an antenna, people that work on phase array antennas as well. These are actually variable frequency phase array antennas, so that they work for software-defined radios, which basically means a phase array antenna basically has all these different antennas in this array, right? And the array basically is a harmonic of the wavelength of your frequency, right? So your higher frequencies are going to have a smaller wavelength. So you have to have all these antenna elements at this resonant point. So if you want to change your frequency for your specific antenna with a phase array antenna, you're going to have to actually change this distance. And generally speaking, they're all static, right? But this specific antenna company, which is one that my father and I are starting to work with, they do basically variable frequency phase array antennas for software-defined radios, which is really incredible, because we're basically going to be having multiple frequencies that are interacting with, but we can start to define, like create these software-defined radios along with the software-defined routing, right? So ultimately what the result of this is going to be is we're going to be getting extremely high gains, very big, long distance essentially for, these communication systems with pretty decent bandwidth too. I mean, 5.8 gigahertz based on, if they were doing quadrature amplification 1024, they were getting about 5 gigabits per second per channel, I believe, or per beam, which is a pretty decent amount for 5.8 gigahertz. So we're looking at about a 900 megahertz up, 5.8 gigahertz down. And then the antenna was a really important component because developing the software-defined router and this software-defined radio, we're going to need to have actual hardware to do it. So since we're in the initial implementation phases of this operating system, and I mean, surprisingly, right, this is surprising to me, operating system architecture is not incredibly complicated. It actually is, it's pretty simple. I mean, some of these microkernels we're looking at right now are like 35, 40,000 lines of code is all. And I mean, for anybody that doesn't know, Nexus right now is about 100,000 lines of code. So it's a smaller, smaller bite to chew. Honestly, I mean, a lot of the work on Tritium, like, I mean, I think I maybe took it for granted how difficult it was. I mean, it was just something that we just have been doing, right? But now other things compared to it are not quite as difficult feeling, right? So anyway, these phase array antennas are a really important component because we need to have this hardware in order to start developing our software-defined radios and our software-defined routing system, right? Now, part of this routing system that I've been discussing is it's essentially gonna create this type of democratized routing where I build up a reputation based on my merit of contribution to the network, and other people will route my packets for me so that you can create a very, very low barrier to entry to access this network, right? There's not going to be ISPs. You're not going to have to pay all these bills. What you will have to be doing, though, is paying a small fee to the mapping system or to the satellites in order to store some of your RLOCs for locator identifier separation protocol, because we're going to be running locator identifier separation protocol, obviously, but what's going to be cool is it's going to actually function off of an IP address, internet protocol address, and an NP address, a Nexus protocol address. So we're pretty close to, I mean, I wouldn't say we're at like specification phases, but we're moving quite along with the software-defined routing system and the Nexus protocol. And for those that don't understand, we're essentially building our own addressing system. So IP addresses are not going to exist on Nexus. They're going to be NP addresses. They're going to be a specific type, and they're going to be running over locator identifier separation protocol. So what's really important about that is that as this network is beginning to emerge, as we're getting more software-defined, satellites up, and we're getting more of these mesh networks going, we may not have complete mesh coverage like in all cities, right? Some people are going to have to buy ground stations and stuff like that. So having locator identifier separation protocol run is going to be really, really important, because it's basically going to allow us to operate from one to the other, right? You're going to be able to jump from one. You're going to be able to jump from one network to the other without having any sort of, how should I say, inconsistency in the interface. So it's going to be a same common interface. Like I can just send to Paul's username, and underneath the hood, all the magic's going to happen where, that could take a path through regular IP, or that could take a path through an NP address. So to the regular user, it's going to feel very similar to how we're using the internet right now. As far as the functionality, I click a button, it's going to go, which is really, I think, really important for these initial stages of this new internet protocol as it's deploying, because people are going to need, the network's going to take time to build itself because it's being designed to essentially produce blockchain-like game theory in with it, right? Which is going to create this incentive for people to build the network. But until the network gets built, right, you're not going to have full coverage. And so this, running Lisp over both is going to allow that to happen. I could maybe not have mesh access at my home, but I can send it right through IP to the nearest ground station that then can deploy it up to the satellite, right? So that's all been coming together really, really beautifully. It's been, the designs and the architecture are actually becoming really well-defined. Working with some of the people from Cisco and everything has been really valuable as far as developing this new type of architecture. So that's kind of like where the satellites are and the antennas and stuff. going to be meeting in the next few months, having some more working group meetings. I've been putting together a group of people, some of their best in the fields, as far as some in cybersecurity, some in hardware, some in software, and some in routing, right? And between all of these, it's essentially going to be the initial formations of the initial architecture with, like I said, the best people in the fields. And from the discussions such as the presentation I made at DEF CON, we've had incredibly positive reception, especially from the cybersecurity community. The cybersecurity community was very impressed, and targeting the IoT industry for the initial operating system, IoT and Cube satellites, is also a really, really valuable starting place, because IoT is just completely, it's just horrible security, beyond horrible security. And it's the problem is that so many people cut corners, right? So those little IoT devices you have, like your Nest thermometer in your house, that can actually, you can be completely compromised just because of that thermometer. I think the Nest ones aren't very well designed. I mean, they don't even have full authentication into the administration of those things sometimes. And so you can penetrate into somebody's network through their IoT devices. And then once you get on their network, then you can do ARP spoofing and stuff like that, and man-on-the-mill attack and everything. So, I mean, there's a lot of issues with IoT, and there's lacks of standardizations. And there's just, I mean, beyond what I can say as far as like the sheer number of actual, I mean, just the sheer number of issues with these things. And I think they're being deployed a little bit prematurely, in the sense that the technology stack is not fully developed and matured. And so there's a lot of these security issues. I mean, some of my friends have actually figured out how to hack wheelchairs and stuff like that. I mean, the security is just really subpar. Yeah, and they controlled it with an Xbox controller, right? So
that's hilarious.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I've been becoming friends with quite a few of these really, really cool hacker guys, you know, through Nathan and everything. And I mean, they're really good guys. And I mean, that's one reason that we're focusing more on like security conferences rather than blockchain conferences. Because if you look at the blockchain industry, the industry itself thinks that they're changing the world, right? But everybody else from the outside doesn't. If you really look, I mean, they're recycling the same hogwash, and they're not producing any value in the real world, right? Where what made Bitcoin really truly what it is today is that it was valuable to people. You could use it to exchange. There was merchants, you know, and it really started with Silk Road. That was a big driving point of the valuation of Bitcoin, right? Now Bitcoin has been devalued in the sense that you can't even use it. Nobody pays with Bitcoin anymore, I don't think. I think the number of merchants has just dipped more and more and more and more. Because it's just becoming increasingly unusable. So it's really just a speculative vehicle right now. So they've taken Bitcoin out of like a practical usable currency and turned it into this totally unusable currency. And so a lot of those real world valuations that Bitcoin was actually producing, I'm not seeing so much anymore. And Ethereum is another great example. Is they're saying that they're producing real world value, but they aren't. And that's where a lot of like the industry, like I've noticed, like some people have said, oh, are you guys going to create some sort of token swap where people can swap their ERC20 tokens on a Nexus and stuff like that? No, to me, that's not the best strategy that we could have, because from my current perspective, the people that are building the real dApps are not using Ethereum. They're actually just using an ERC20 token, and everything else on their dApp is not touching blockchain at all. Why? Because they're not going to get their app all tangled into this protocol that really is just falling apart, right? So this is a bit of a, how should I say it? The smart people are waiting for the right blockchain, right? So we've been targeting, as far as like our marketing and building use cases, we've been discussing it with the smart people, right? The ones that have been waiting, you know, not the ones that have been like, oh, hey, you know, this is a new paradigm. We're going to say, you know, and solve everything and whatever. Like a lot of the Ethereum people have, you know, the mindset of, this is actually going to basically, like, there's, like I said, people that are waiting and have been waiting, and we've had pretty good success right now. We've got close to a dozen use cases that are building right now. Comparatively to a year ago, we were, I mean, I think we had the WAS use case, or Nexus Enterprise had the WAS use case, and there's a few other ones, but I'm not. I think a lot of the enterprise guys, I think their use cases fell through. But I mean, we're in a much better position now, a year later, than we were then. And these are not just like your typical type of dApps where it's a gambling one, or like, you know, whatever. Like most of these dApps are just like gambling or DeFi.
We do actually have a gambling app.
We do, yeah. We do, yeah. Well, that's somebody else's in the community that is thinking about that. But I mean, that's why I say it's not just, we're focusing on different areas, right? Such as transportation, social media, you know, digital identity, you know, continuation from that. So it's looking really good. We've had a lot of positive reception from the Tau framework as well, from developers. And it's been really great to be essentially getting these nice feedback loops from people from our initial development and our initial deployment. So I think that's, okay, I covered satellites, use cases. As far as the core architecture, I'm still hammering out the lower level database. I've been deep on this for quite a while. I got it to the point last time where I think my last update was that I've got it pretty close to constant time. That's like, you know, it loses, I think it was losing 40% after, you know, it filled up half or something. Now it's fully 100% constant time with primary, secondary bloom filters and a bunch of other stuff. I've been tuning it to a point. And now on my desktop, it literally is 180,000 reads per second, and it doesn't change. Like it fluctuates between like 175,000 and 185,000, but it stays constant time the entire time. So it's pretty well in its fully formed state right now. I'm just finishing up a type of like Fibonacci linear probing, which is essentially going to allow it to fill itself up. My data last time too, I said that we saved about 2 gigabytes of disk space. That was just with the linear probing before I added bloom filters. But now that I added bloom filters, it requires more space to be utilized. So basically, the last sync I did, it was about 11 gigabytes. So it takes a little bit more disk space now, just because of these index files that hold your bloom filters. But you know, that it's a small sacrifice to pay. I mean, that it's only 1.5 gigabytes total extra, like total. So that means if we add 1 billion keys to the data set, right, it's not going to change how much indexing is needed. That index file is an index file that can handle 5 billion keys, or that's at least what I set them to handle, right? So that can be assured to not change. So what I'm doing after I finish this LLD is I'm going to get to do some nice multi-threading, right? So the synchronization process right now is single-threaded. You're just connecting to one node and you're asking that one node for one thing. And you're getting your list of blocks from them. So I'm actually going to make, you know, as I said, the contract processing is 30,000 to 100,000. That's single-threaded. Okay, but since we have 6 chains, we can actually multi-thread that pretty well. And basically, as long as you'll have to multi-thread per SIG chain, right? So I'm actually going to develop this multi-threading system, not only in the contract processing, but in the synchronization process, so that when you first start syncing, you're going to actually just download the blocks, right? The Tritium blocks without the transactions. And then there's going to be multiple threads in the background that after that are going to talk to all of their other nodes and download all of the rest of the transactions, right? So that we're going to get a multi-threaded bandwidth. Because when I was profiling the synchronization process, I noticed that I'm really only going about 1.5 megabytes per second on a downlink. And I do get up to about 7.5 megabytes per second when I get to really fat parts of the chain, really big blocks. But I believe that we're potentially running into an uplink bottleneck. There's only so much data that can be delivered from one server at a time. So by adding this multi-threading, you'll be able to download your block headers from one node. And then while this is all happening too, this is going to be the magic of it. It's going to operate in client mode. So at least by what I'm working on designing it to is you start up your node. By default, it'll be in client mode so that you can just start using it. It'll sync in about 5 or 10 seconds. And you'll see that when Kendall gives his demonstration. And then I'm basically going to in the background, it'll start synchronizing the entire blockchain and then downloading the transactions in this type of multi-thread. So I think we'll be able to get the synchronization time faster than it is right now. My last test with the LOD updates and stuff was about 22 minutes to synchronize the entire chain. I think we might, I mean, and that was at an average of about 1.5 megabytes per second. My bandwidth, I've seen it go to 7.5 megabytes per second. So theoretically, right, I should be able to get a 3 or 4x out of that. So I may be able to get it down to 10 minutes, depending on my bandwidth and everything like that. And also the database, you know, bottlenecks or anything like that. So then after that, I'm going to be doing a more pruning type systems, right, where we're going to have different pruning levels. And basically what we're doing is this update, just consider this update is a massive scaling update that once it's released, I'd say we could comfortably be processing a few thousand transactions per second for at least a year, right? Before we're going to start to, you know, see disk usage issues and stuff like that. I mean, it's really, really solid. Like this thing is not going to slow down. Like Ethereum, they slow down quite significantly, and it's just going to get worse and worse because they have more and more data in their data set to sift through. And because their database is in constant time, it's actually a type of log n. I mean, when I did LOD versus LevelDB tests, I mean, once I got to about 10 million keys, LevelDB was pretty quick when it had nothing in there. It was writing, I think about 1 second to write 100,000 entries. Once I got to 10 million entries in this database, it started taking about 7 or 8 seconds. So we're talking about like 7 to 10 times slower just from 10 million keys, right? Where in our case, it literally does not slow down at all. We don't have any reduction. I figured out the bottleneck that was causing us to lose about 40%. So it all the way through. The only time that you get a little bit of slowdown is once the database gets really close to full. Once you're at about 90% and you start having to do reverse linear probing and stuff, you'll maybe see it go down to like 170, you know, 20% maximum reduction in the actual processing capacity, which is pretty significant. It's really fast. And by the design of it too, we're using locality, right? So we focus on doing as much as we can within this certain local space on the disk. So with this linear probing and stuff like that, generally you're not going to be needing to probe. But once you start getting full and, you know, your hash map, you know, your bucket is full and it doesn't have any more key slots, you're going to need to start finding some around you. So it does this through a type of linear probing through a Fibonacci expansion sequence that takes advantage of the locality of your disk, right? If I've already read this much, I can just read a little bit extra here and it's really not that much overhead. But if I have to seek to another point on the disk and then read from there, that's going to be killing our runtime, right? So this takes advantage of as many local accesses as possible to really get you a lot of scaling without much reduction in the performance on it. So the LOD is pretty close to final iteration now. And like I said, I'm going to be, after this, working on more of the scaling stuff because I've been working on this scaling update for 5-6 months now, just profiling it and finding all of the bottlenecks and getting it, you know, our next phase of faster. So, you know, this next update is going to be a really, I think, one of our fundamental foundation pieces, which is going to be really important for everybody essentially to be getting involved. Yeah. And, you know, as we get more and more people involved, we're not going to be having this, oh, hey, why is my Nexus wallet taking longer to load? Like, why is my transaction cost so much? And like, oh, you know, all those, you know, difficult scaling issues that Ethereum is having. We're fortunate enough to be in a position where we don't have to have those mistakes. You know, and at this current point in time, we are at a nice size for our current level of development, because if we did have, you know, millions and millions of users right now, it would be a lot more difficult to actually get things done effectively. And I think that's one thing that Ethereum is a victim of its own success. We, you know, are not in that negative position so much. But after this update is out, I think that's when it's going to be time for a lot more people to get to know who we are. So the last thing I have to report is the ambassadors. So on the legal side of things now, so right now in the US Embassy, there's Nexus Embassy US, and then there's Nexus Development US LLC. So what we're doing right now is we're creating Nexus Ambassadors US LLC. So this is another LLC, and we're actually working on operating agreements right now that are going to reflect the social organizational structure that we've been designing into it. And if you guys, any of you are familiar with some of the discussions that we had about the allocation of the developer SIG chain to the ambassador working group, the community finally settled on that being something that would be managed more by the US, which ended up becoming a great opportunity to create this ambassador LLC and get some of these processes more formalized. So I believe in the next bit, I mean, I don't want to give a specific, I think sometime early next month, the ambassadors are going to be holding a Zoom call as well to get feedback from you guys and to kind of go over more marketing stuff. And, you know, for those that don't understand the structure, ambassadors are kind of a more yang external. They're an external, and then the developers are more yin or internal, right? They're developing the internal constructs, the internal core architecture, things like that. And ambassadors are the ones that are going out there and communicating that with people. So every embassy is going to have an ambassador and a developer groups, right? And they're groups of 5. So right now, you know, they're basically getting everything really dialed in, and they're going to be getting a lot more active and having a lot more of a public appearance for you guys, getting a lot more direct feedback from the community and everything like that. So that's something to also look forward to as well. Everything on that front has been going really wonderfully. The community's been coming together amazingly. There's a lot of new people that are getting in, and we're really getting a strong network effect together, which this is the force that made Bitcoin what it is. I don't foresee Bitcoin getting too much, like, I mean, it may get pumped and whatever, but like, I mean, the network effect that Bitcoin had, I just don't see it anymore. I mean, it kind of has it, but I mean, it's really just become a speculative vehicle that people do talk about, but I mean, the value that it produced in the world is just like becoming less and less and less. And now JP Morgan Chase is talking about opening up Bitcoin Lightning channels and stuff like that, which is like exactly what Lightning Network was created for, right? So, you know, I mean, this is a really important component, because if you look at Ethereum or look at all these coins and you say, oh yeah, they got marketing, they got better marketing, blah, 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 they're great, they're better than us. So it's like, well, no, have you ever seen them move and rank? Have you ever seen Tron overtake Litecoin? Like, they all stay at the exact same ranks. Why? Because they don't have network effects. All they have is this client server type situation, or a slave master relationship, where the masters create everything that everybody else waits and then bows down to, right? And it doesn't really give people that ownership, that ability to take things into their own hands and make things better for themselves, right? And that's really one of the fundamental qualities that made Bitcoin what it is, that really brought Bitcoin to the world, is that network effect, right? The power of people working together and focusing together. And I mean, you know, these crypto coins and the projects, you know, they may have large teams, say they have large teams, but that's nothing compared to a community full of passionate people that are all kicking ass. And right now, like I said, we have a really good snowball going on the ambassador side. It's been really, really awesome to see everybody stepping up and more people joining in and getting involved. And it's been an honor to work with them. And on the development side too, we're getting a really nice snowball with the use cases, where they're just starting to naturally flow in now because of word of mouth or something else like that. So everything's looking really good on that front. And I think that's about all I have for this update. I guess, Paul, you can cover some of the ground that I missed.
Actually, I'm going to hand over to Kendall soon. He wants to get on with his demo first.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
before I hand over to him, I just wanted to say something. You touched on a really good point there about targeting real world use cases, and it's a really important point in my mind, because right now the whole crypto community is talking about decentralized finance, right? It's DeFi is the big thing. But actually, when you drill into it, it's not really a real world use case. There are some concepts in DeFi that could be applied to the real world, and it's not all a big Ponzi as some people are making out. However, like 99% plus of people who are using decentralized finance applications are the trading crypto community, it's just not being used by anyone externally. So we've got Ethereum that's being completely bloated. You know, transaction fees are huge. It's not slow because, you know, it's got quite fast block times, but with the transaction fees being as they are,
Well, actually, it takes 20 seconds to validate a block, bro. So if you don't have a solid state drive, it takes 20 seconds to validate the block, and it's a 15-second block time. And that's like a
yeah,
stat.
no, that doesn't add up, right?
Yeah, it's terrible.
There's the mempool backlog for Ethereum it sits roughly at about 150,000 transactions constantly, and when there's, you know, periods of high traffic, that goes up to, you know, 200,000 transactions. Those are just transactions that are waiting, that are never going to get confirmed. So that whole decentralized finance thing, as I say, there are some nice use cases that are bundled in that whole DeFi ecosystem. Certainly there's some borrowing and lending platforms that look like they have some mileage, but it's just not going to be sustainable for people outside of the current crypto community, because it's just too expensive to use, it's too slow to use. So yeah, I just wanted to make the point there that yes, there are some things being built, but some dApps being built, but at the moment they don't really have any applicability to people outside of crypto. And I think that's where people are missing the point. They're not targeting industries that could really benefit from blockchain. And so that's, I guess, where we've been shifting our focus and saying, yeah, okay, fine, we're not having, you know, we're not on the decentralized finance bandwagon that's going on right now, but that's because we're still building.
I want to give a little reminder of people too of history and how it tends to repeat itself. Okay. If anybody remembers what was happening 4 years ago, pretty close to today, right? I mean, around this time, the Dow. And everybody remembers what happened there. And it was this great idea. Everybody was hyping. They raised like $200-300 million in this retarded sale. And then the entire thing got hacked, right? I'm not sure that's exactly what's going to be happening with all this DeFi stuff, but I have noticed a pattern with Ethereum specifically is people get excited about ideas that may be good, but they're not fully thought out and they're not thought out well enough. And that has led to a lot of serious issues, which it's starting, the DeFi stuff is kind of reminding me a little bit of the DAO right now, to be honest, with the hype, just the ridiculous hype and everything. So, I mean, I hope it doesn't end super badly, but like, keep that in mind. Like, I would be careful of DeFi if I were you, especially since it's so overhyped. Yeah, I mean, once Bitcoin changes volume or price too much, like it's going to wipe out because all these collateralized stable coins are based off the price of ETH, which is based off the price of Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin makes too big of a move, like it's going to be really bad. So, I mean, I just personally, anybody that's messing around with the DeFi stuff, I would just be cautious. That's just a little recommendation. Sorry to interrupt, Paul. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. So I heard this this crazy statistic that the weekend before last, of all of the decentralized finance projects that were launched over that weekend, 35% of them were rug pulls. 35% were complete scams that were just, and this is the weekend before last, because they're basically just doing copy and paste things right now. Yeah. They're just copying a project, but then, and they're all the same pattern, where, you know, you provide liquidity to a pool, and then you stake those tokens and you get some other reward token, blah, 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 blah. And they copy and paste it. And then as soon as your liquidity is in there, they got control of all your funds. It's shocking. There's just, it's all happening too fast.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's really dangerous. I mean, so I don't want anybody to think that we're not focused on decentralized finance. We are. We're just spending the time to assess it before we implement it. I mean, like an example of something from, I mean, Natote, if you're on, you can, you know, pop in or whatever. I can unmute you or whatever. But I mean, Natote was talking about some of the issues. And actually, Natote, if you want to chime in, that would be cool. Let's see. But anyway, So yeah, like one of the issues is like the loan, right? So if you're in Pennsylvania and you loan somebody something like 6%, but the bank rate is 3%. If you're above that 3%, then the actual person, if you're like 3% above the actual loan value, then somebody can actually completely sue you for giving them a too high of an interest loan and steal your entire money back. Right? This is just like one state. There's so many weird things when you start getting into the loan industry. That's banks. Like, they're gonna have so many weird little nuances that you got to be careful of. So like we're not necessarily like against decentralized finance, but what we are is really focused on making it something safe, and yeah, I mean we're not entirely convinced that it's something that's ready yet, really.
Okay. On that, I'm gonna shut up for a little while and hand over to Kendall. I'll come back with some of my updates in a little while, but I think he's keen to get on and get his demo done.
Yeah.
Kendall, you about ready, mate? Because you're muted at the moment.
Let's see.
He might not be able to unmute. You might want to just make sure he can.
Okay.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Let's try and, oh, not that, not my ugly mud. There we go. All right. Oh. All right, so I'll try and do this as best I can, but I know everyone was really excited about what Colin had just talked about in terms of our progress on the mobile wallet. So here it is on the iPad. So I'm gonna just go through it a little bit. It looks like it's a little hard to see because I'm capturing on my phone, right? But you'll get the idea and everything. So we have. I'm not gonna attempt to do that. Anyways, so it's pretty much going to be the same as we had it on that video that I had posted earlier. But let me just log in here. So on this, this is running through the computer, so it's a little slower than it would be if it was on a if it was not attached, right? So I mean, it's still roughly about less than 10 seconds. Login is gonna be less than 10 seconds. We have the let's see, the sync rate right now is averages about 1,000 blocks a second. And I think we can get that a little lower. But for now, I think that's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, we're doing stuff, this is not like anything anyone has ever done. So, it is what it is. But anyway, so I'll go through kind of what I did on that other video that I posted. We'll just, let's see, go to our trust account here, copy this address, and we go here, we're going to send from our default here.
Hey, Kendall, any chance of getting your camera a little bit closer to that screen? Because it's a bit hard to see with the
glare.
A whiteout, yeah.
Yeah, hold on. Let me move this a little bit.
Maybe you can bring it up towards the screen.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I have this like tripod thing.
Just like lean your iPad up against the monitor or something.
Hold on. You know what? Why is it not using? Because this is one of the cameras that has phones that has two cameras, and it's not using the right.
That's your face.
No, I don't want that. Well,
okay, that's okay. That's all right. That's pretty good. We can see that.
All right. Okay, so we're gonna paste in that address right here. We'll send in about say 50 tokens. So we're sending 50. Here's our two addresses. Enter in the PIN here. And the transaction is sent. We have this little notification here. So if we go to the transactions page, let's see. So that's the one right here. You see, maybe it's kind of hard to see on the video. This one is gray, so it's not been confirmed yet, but we can still look at it. So got our transaction ID, all the stuff, stream users, confirmation 0. It's probably going to stay 0, honestly, because Paul, I don't know if you're running your node right now. It's fine. And we have our contracts here. So obviously this is only one contract. We'll go back to when we made our, here. So this is when we made our sig chain. So we have all our different contracts here. Great. We created this object. Here's our trust, our name, our account, and our crypto object. So that's all in there. Let's see, you can go back here to the overview. Go down here, you can see we have, available, pending, unconfirmed, and then we can close that. So it's really like, we did a lot of like research on banking apps and stuff like that. So we kind of, and not that we want to like be a bank, right? It's just that, collectively people are already used to some of those similar layouts. And, you want to be it familiar to people if you're trying to go for a mass audience. And that's what we're trying to do, right? So we can go to this trust account. You see, so I have unconfirmed right here is 50. So that's the one I just sent. And I have some pending balance from the previous tests I've done. We are running on the testnet right here, public testnet. Obviously this is not real Nexus, but yeah, so, and then we go back here, we have other options here. Obviously we're going to have tokens, assets, names, namespace. We'll have all of that available at some point. Right now it's just coming soon. We are obviously keen on just getting the basic layout here available to people. And we have color scheme, base currency. You can use and I crashed it. Okay, so that's a live demo. Let's try it again. We'll try this again here. But the main point of that was that you can connect to a external, you can use a external core if you'd like to. You have to run it on your own network. So it has to be searchable. The port has to be available. But it allows you to run stuff on your computer if you want to. I don't know, maybe if you want to have this as like some sort of like smart device, or I don't know, a smart mirror or something. I'm not sure. But yes, we have, and then Actually, I think we kind of really covered everything. Look, we have working really hard on this, on getting all this set up and, getting this running. So we're kind of prioritizing just getting some basic sending, receiving, looking through transactions, kind of knowing, what's up on your account. And so hopefully we'll be able to get this out here to people. Obviously, we don't know yet what we want to. Oops. Don't look at my figures. So we're gonna have, obviously, if anyone knows anything about iOS development, they have what's called test flight, and that is a very good way to beta test applications. So you can send out basically invites, and they get through the test flight app, they install our program. So it'd be a lot. That I think is what we're going to do, instead of trying to just give people access to stuff or whatever, because this is a lot more controlled. But in terms of that, we don't have any timeline right now. Hopefully in a couple weeks, maybe a month or two. But we've obviously made really, really good progress. I know everyone was chomping at the bit on getting some sort of mobile wallet up and running. And I mean, obviously it's not ready yet, but this is what we've been working, hard on for the last several months. And I know obviously people want updates all the time, but it is what it is. Development is what it is. But we're at a really good point. It's only going to get better. So we're gonna right now and this goes to what Colin had said earlier. Is developing this framework, and obviously it is Apple, so it's never easy. But I already have it pretty much done. I have it done if I do it like manually, if I put everything in the right spot and package it up, that's all done manually. Right now I'm just working with our makefile so that it can be done, with just a command, and all these building and compiling, so like that will be done automatically. But if people don't know, the framework is, and this is going to be different than what Android is going to offer, but for iOS and Android is library and headers, and you literally just drag it and drop it into your Xcode project. You obviously link it to your other code, but then you'll be able to use Objective C++, which is already available in Xcode, to tap into those headers, and then you can run your node and do whatever you want. And obviously we'll have examples later, but that's what that is. So it's not, so like on the desktop wallet, it's like when you want to, obviously you can install an application that has a Nexus core in it that's separate than our official GUI. But a lot of things are going to be add-ons to our GUI. Now, like what Colin said, for mobile, we are not going to have a, let's say, module store where you can add stuff to this. If you want to have a different module or a DApp or whatever that uses our Nexus core, that will be using our framework and is a standalone application that you run that has nothing to do with our official GUI wallet. So that does make it a little easier for some developers, but that's just going to be the difference between mobile and desktop. And then so next is going to, so I'm still working on that, and then next is going to be Android. And we've decided to focus mainly on iOS because we knew about how difficult Apple is on their development. So we decided to get that first. That way, if anything bad happened, and I mean, nothing really bad happened, but it just took a while. But now, after I get this done, I can move on to Android, and that'll hopefully be a very smoother kind of development cycle. And once that's done, then we can kind of integrate both these things into a single repo and, go from there. Just build it, test it. Hopefully by then we'll get to a point where we can, give out, beta tests and stuff like that. But like all this is running on a test net, so there's other things there first we gotta work on. But yeah, I think that's gonna be pretty much my update. I'm here right now to answer any questions. Or I know that you have.
If you guys have questions, you can send a direct message to Kendall. If you want to send them in there. Right now, we just have the public messages disabled. Unfortunately, some people can't be responsible enough of themselves. So I open it up for 2 minutes, and then as soon as I open it up, it's like there's already toxic stuff coming out. So just send a direct message if you.
I know it's so it's funny. It's like a couple months ago. Every day it'd be mobile wallet on the Slack. Yeah. And then I'm like, all right, it's here. I finally finished it. And then no one's talking about it. So please, I want to talk about it. So please go on our Slack.
I'd like to give you some props too. I mean, what you figured out is Kendall basically compiled this into a library inside the project on iOS. I mean, it was not an easy feat. We went through numerous iterations. I mean, we went from like, a 5-minute login time with the Linux emulator and stuff because it didn't run native on iOS. And so he was using this Linux emulator. When we first got it plugged in, we're like, yeah, it's done. And then it's like, okay, that's not going to work.
Yeah, it was very demoralizing, but it is what having all these files be compiled and run natively is obviously the best way, and not having any other sort of third-party headers that are running some of these things. So, just had to dig in and get it done. But yeah, again, I want to preference that phones aren't really like, they are powerful, but they're not that powerful. So, it's not going to be not as snappy as the desktop, but I mean, the fact that you can get almost 1,000 blocks a second on this, 7-inch iPad Air, that's like 4 years old. I mean, it's awesome. So it's only going to get better once.
It's like a 9-second login time too, which is fairly decent for an old device. I mean, I'm going to test. I still have an old iPhone 7. This thing's from this is about 4 years old too. So I'm going to run it on this too and test it out. And we're going to get, I mean, it's the fact that it really is logging pretty decent and quick, even on old hardware. I mean, that's not necessarily a symptom of Nexus, right? That's the Argon 2 hash. So Nexus is stupid light. I mean, I think last I checked, client mode takes like 5 megabytes of memory or something. It's and a few hundred megabytes of your disk space. But so it's the Argon 2 that was our big issue with, the Linux. Right. Argon 2 is just so memory intensive, right? It was going to be, it was consuming, and the Linux emulator, I think doing all of the memory and stuff to the iOS native it was like 5 minutes to log in. And we're just like, this is not going to work.
And that was the login. If you wanted to create a user, it was like 30 minutes.
Yeah. Well, did you create a user on it now too?
No, I haven't done that. I mean, I could try it right now, but I don't have.
It's about 10 seconds. 10 seconds for login. Where on my computer, it's 1 second to log in on a desktop, and on my desktop, it's about 10 seconds to create an account. 10 or 15 seconds to create an account. Paul, you can chime in on that one too.
Yeah, when I was running this on the iOS simulator, so that's running on the computer, but it simulates, hardware. It was about 12 seconds to creating a user. So it's definitely, I mean, obviously it's a little slower
Okay.
because we have that stuff in there, but still, it's still not bad. I mean, obviously we want it coming from the desktop where it's snappy. But I think normally, I don't think users are going to like really stressed about that kind of stuff. I mean, you're not going to be creating users all the time. You're not going to be logging in all the time. So having that like 10-second wait time, I mean, I think it's nothing. I don't really feel like it's a big deal.
Yeah. Okay. Made has a question to you. Sorry, I guess chat's only open to me. So send me a message, everybody, if you have questions for Kendall. Or ask me to unmute. Send me a message to unmute, a request to unmute, and I'll unmute you too if you want to ask. Made says mobile will work for both iOS and Android as a light client.
Yes, light client only. So there's now this can change for Android because they are a lot more open to people wanting to do things on their hardware. But as people may have seen in the news, Apple is very controlling. And if you cross them, even though I do think that Epic Games is in the wrong because they were given a contract saying don't do this and they decided to do it anyways, and now they're suing. But regardless, they have a lot of control, they have a lot of rules, and they change those rules constantly. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with Google's Stadia platform, which is a streaming gaming platform. They have now made it against the rules to have basically an app that you can download other apps in. So Stadia would open up Stadia, and you would have a selection of their games that you could either purchase or stream or whatever. I've never used it, so I don't know. But now, unless they've changed it, because they may have gotten some blowback or gotten sued again, in order to have a separate game, you have to make your own app, which doesn't make any sense at all. So I'm going to turn that back into the original question because I'm sure this is what people are asking for, which is staking. And it is our understanding that staking is not allowed on iOS because that is quote unquote generating revenue, and Apple forbids that. So Coinbase, the Coinbase CEO, I think, was really cracking down on he went on a big rant about how Apple was screwing them over and everything like that. So unless things change, I mean, obviously we're open to it, and I think everything is possible. We will make it happen, but for our understanding is that is something that is not allowed for iOS. Now for Android, I'm not 100% sure, but it doesn't sound like that's something that we're going to be able to put, make built in. And that might be something that maybe it's another third party or something like that, because with this whole, because a lot of people say staking is generating revenue, and that's a gray area that we don't want to be in any situation where we have our application taken down or anything like that.
To get to that staking system too, I mean, it may not be just staking, it could be L1 processing for the 3DC. We've discussed that as an option for having, the L1 layer be doing some of that generic processing. It may be that we have to wait for Nexus OS to get there, which would be phase 2 Nexus OS. Phase 1, as I said, is IoT and satellites. Phase 2 is mobile phones and desktop computers, right? Phase 2 actually might go mobile phones before we get to desktop, actually, because I think that's going to be a little bit higher of a need. So we'll get to that at a certain point, whether or not it's staking or not. But Kendall, and I think Paul might be able to go through some of this that you guys have been talking about, is the connecting to your home node, Paul, using the API. I would explain that a little bit too, because that solves that staking thing a bit.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that. That's probably not something actually Kendall and
I have one question for Kendall.
Okay, go for it.
after iOS wallet is done, how long might it take for approval to the App Store? Are you sure?
Well, it's kind of twofold because client mode, the mobile version will only work with client mode. I did actually get it working without client mode, but it won't. That's not a feasible thing for most users and phones because it definitely used a lot more memory. But anyways, so client mode is still under merging. I don't know. Paul obviously can talk about that, but that has to be ready for mainnet before this gets put out anywhere. And but even then, like going to this stage and then going to test flight still could probably take, I mean, I want to say probably a month because we gotta do our due diligence and do our thing before we kind of offer this beta test to people. Even if we lock it in just to test net, we want to be ready to do that. And right now, we're still working on, I'm going to be switching over to the Android version. So I don't, we can't be actively developing and running alpha or beta testing at the same time. We just don't have the engineering power to handle all that. So
all of the implementation is done too. Like, I mean, we have little details around the edges for like light mode, tokenized assets, like needed a little bit of love and like some basic little things, and pooled staking's done. And like the LOD implementation is done. Like we're pretty well code complete for this next update. I have a bit more I have to do just because I've been down so deep in the LOD. I've got like a little bit of hybrid mode and some of the pruning and multi-threading stuff. But other than that, like, I mean, we're on that final stretch, on the way, like it's just getting these testing. I mean, and you'll know by our beta testing cycle too, when to expect it. Like Kendall said, probably about a month and a half after we finish beta testing is when we'll have that released. And as he said, we have a prerequisite of the client mode or the light mode or the light node runs over the main network, right? So other nodes have to support light nodes, right? They have to support those nodes. So there's an upgrade in the actual network protocol versioning for this next update. So it will most likely be after the release of Tritium++, which Tritium++ is coming in 2 phases. The first phase is our foundational scaling, mobile wallet, light mode, all this cool stuff. And then the second phase is DAO and augmented contracts, right? Which are just like this one's still a bit foundational, this update. Like there's still a bit of foundational stuff, but the really cool quality about it too is that it has full redundancy, right? So if you're using like your BitPay wallet and stuff, I don't know if you've ever noticed that you can't, sometimes it won't refresh. Oh, sorry, this failed the request, blah, blah, blah. Right? And it happens because it's running through this proxy that ends up becoming like this communicator. So when this network runs up, like if you are talking to a node on your light node and you don't get anything back from it, you just go talk to another node, right? It'll scale really, really well, which is really cool. So it's going to be no maintenance for us. It's going to be basically like a desktop wallet. It will require some sort of upgrade process, but like Kendall's got the Android stuff, and like you'll be seeing the beta testing. So like, just kind of keep that in mind, like just time enough of our beta cycles, and it'll be most likely after this next hard fork, which like I said, is pretty close to code complete. I have a bit more code that I have to do. We're just in these final testing. Scott's been testing pooled staking for quite a while. And because of that, unfortunate circumstance of Apple, the staking isn't going to be enabled for now, right? And there's another aspect too, is that you would have to have full node to do staking because you have to have all the transactions in order to verify that. And the other side of it too is part of the incentive of building up trust is that you actually have to spend time producing value for the network and hosting the data for the network. So you shouldn't be able to build up trust if you only have your own data. That makes you more of a leech and not a contributor. So it's also a gamification issue too, is why we made that choice. But Paul, or Kendall, did you have anything more that you wanted to cover?
No, I feel like I've done all my update, and I don't have any other questions coming in from Slack. So
There's like There's one that doesn't really make sense, so it's kind of uncatchable. So we'll just skip that one. But yeah, okay. If you feel,
Awesome.
Paul, if you want to kind of rock and roll from here.
Yeah, let me know. I'm here to answer questions on
Yeah,
Slack if people want to chat.
I'd like to fire it up on this phone to see how it works.
Yeah, yeah. I'll get you set up.
It's on Expo,
Maybe
right?
today or tomorrow.
Is it on Expo?
Yes, but I've kind of had to. I've done what's called ejecting from Expo, so
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how to do all that just yet. So,
Yeah,
but
whatever. Yeah, I'm just excited to visit.
yeah,
I mean, I'm glad we spent the time to do this right, because it's a little bit more time now to save us a lot of work in the future.
right. All right. Well, I'll hand it over to Paul then.
Cool. Thanks, Kendall.
Yeah, so on the staking or lack thereof in light mode, I think you made the point there that you need to be doing some work on the network. So I think it's fine that it's not enabled for it, but that doesn't mean that people who want to stake won't have a use for the mobile wallet. It doesn't stop them from having a node at home doing their staking, logged into that sig chain, and then log into the exact same sig chain on their mobile phone if they want to send some funds or something like that. So there's that option. There's Colin also mentioned that, Kendall also mentioned the ability to configure the mobile wallet to connect to a remote core just in the same way as we do with the desktop wallet. So what that will mean is that the mobile wallet, instead of running the core locally on the phone, will connect to a different node wherever you point it, and that can be your node at home. At the moment, if you want to do that with a desktop wallet, there's a bit of fiddling around that you need to do to make your IP address accessible externally and things like that. But we're going to add a feature to the mobile wallet. It's just going to need to be in both the mobile and desktop wallet, where we're going to leverage the peer-to-peer API that we built that I think we've already talked about in previous Zoom. And what that API allows us to do is send a message via the network from one node to another only by using the signature chain Genesis hash to address the recipient. So what that means is that if I want to get my mobile wallet to connect to my desktop wallet at home, I can fire up the mobile wallet and connect to the connect in light mode, log in, and then issue a message essentially saying I'd like to connect to my desktop wallet at home. That will then send a message out via the network with your username, or rather your Genesis hash attached to that message. That's going to get picked up by any desktop node that you're also logged in on, which will then pop up a message on your desktop wallet saying, hey, there's a mobile wallet that's trying to synchronize, trying to connect to this desktop instance. Are you going to allow it? And then we can probably show a pin on both of them, like other, that's a fairly standard way of doing things. So, just make sure this pin matches, sort of thing. And then you can okay that. And what that will do, your desktop wallet can then send its IP address and the port that it's running on back out to the mobile wallet using a peer-to-peer connection. And then your mobile wallet can then connect back to the desktop and then leech off that connection from there on. It's a very nice way of having a mobile wallet connect back to your desktop wallet at home, which can then be staking, and you've got all that, the ability to stake, as well as having a mobile wallet that can use the sig chain that you're already logged in on. So that's a feature that we've worked out the design for. Me and Key worked out that, and I think we won't implement it for the first release of the mobile wallet because it also requires a desktop wallet upgrade as well, but it'll be coming, so that'd be a nice feature. On that, I may as well jump straight into the other changes that have been happening on the desktop wallet, because we have been getting it ready to use with light mode. We're going to be calling this light mode, not client mode. I think it makes a bit more sense. So that means that the desktop app can now work with light mode. We are going to default it to light mode for all new installations as well. So unless you want to enable staking, which is probably the only feature, significant feature anyway, that's not available in light mode, then when you install the desktop wallet first time, it'll be in light mode, which means, you know, new users who are coming into it are going to get a really quick synchronization time and, you know, quick onboarding to be able to send and receive Nexus. So that's one feature we've changed to the desktop app. The other one is multi-user support. And this is quite cool because for those of you who have or manage multiple signature chains, and I know there's quite a few people who do, it often means you have to, you know, completely log out of one and then log back in and check on that and, you know, make sure it's still staking or whatever it is you're doing with it. So we've changed the desktop application, desktop wallet, so you can now switch between sessions essentially. So you can be logged in to multiple signature chains on one node, and then have the desktop app sort of switch between those profiles, so you can log into multiple and then switch between them as you want, which is quite nice. But to augment that feature, we are just in the middle of adding support for staking in multi-user mode. We hadn't planned to release this, but I think it's going to be a really nice feature. It actually turns out it's not that difficult for us to add to our existing architecture on staking, but that means that for those people who may have, maybe you're looking after funds for several family members, I know I do, and I want them staking. At the moment, I put those on physically separate nodes, but I won't need to do that anymore. I can just have one node that's running in multi-user mode. I can log into multiple signature chains on that one node, and I can have them all staking on that one node, and then go to my desktop wallet and then just switch between those profiles and check how they're going. So that's a nice feature that's coming to the desktop app. So I think that covers they're the main changes for the desktop app. Actually, I think we've also we need to disable the legacy mode when you're in light mode as well. So there's we're going to, and I think also the default installation of the desktop wallet is going to not have legacy support turned on by default. I think that's the other thing that's coming as well. Staking, I think I just covered then. Pooled staking is done. The testing for that is basically complete. I don't think Scott's here. I don't think he's online to give us an update on where he's at with that, but he's just adding the support for multi-user staking to the staking process at the moment. So pooled staking is kind of done, ready to go. Yeah, it's been a weird couple of months actually since our last Zoom. There's been a lot of work being done, but nothing that's resulted in new features that we can really show you other than the iOS stuff, which you've already seen. From my point of view, I've been working with quite a few of the use cases that are currently developing on Nexus, just giving them support and making sure that our APIs are doing what they need them to do. And we've actually found some minor bugs in the API that have been rectifying as a result of that. There's been a few things as well, such as you've heard us talk about Bubble, and that we developed a Nexus plugin for the Bubble platform. I won't cover all of that right now, but one of the things we found with Bubble, and we've seen this with other people trying to integrate with our API as well, is we implemented SSL or TLS, because we've already talked about that in the last Zoom, and that allows secure communications. But the way we implemented it so far is that we use a self-signed certificate that is generated every time you start a Nexus node. So it's an ephemeral certificate. We use that for SSL communication. Bubble specifically does not like and does not allow you to use self-signed certificates when making API calls over SSL, which was just a bit of an issue. So I've had to do some work on the SSL side of things to allow you to configure your Nexus node to use an external certificate, that SSL certificate that you would have purchased from a certifying authority. And then our SSL communications use that. So that took a bit of time, and we had to implement that specifically for a use case that's developed on Bubble. And we've seen now that we've got one, we have one use case that's very near to their MVP stage, very near to release. And so they've gone through the process of integrating with their API on Nexus, on Bubble. And as a result of that, we've now got, I think maybe 5 or 6 other use cases that have now started using Bubble, which is really good, but they're also in the early stages of that and therefore require a bit of help from our side just to tell them how to use it essentially. And so I think what we've learned from that is that we need to document the process a bit better if we're going to get people to use platforms like Bubble and use our API, our plugin, sorry. Then we need to do some better documentation there. So we've been doing chores like that essentially. Then I haven't started coding on these, but there's 3 big features that are coming up in maybe some of them will be in the first of the Tritium++ upgrades, but certainly they'll be done for the next one. 3 big features that are required that I've been designing, me and Colin have been designing and documenting ready to be implemented. The first is the file API, which Colin touched on earlier, which is going to be used, among other things. It's going to underpin the LLL OS, and that's going to be used for the file system there, and that's going to allow you to essentially create a file system using Nexus, where sort of header records or metadata records for each file are stored on chain, but the actual file data themselves won't be stored on chain, and the actual physical storage of files is configurable, so you can choose how or where those files might be, and that might just be your local hard drive, or it may be a network hard drive, or, and this is where it starts to get a bit exciting, it can be an IPFS node. And for those of you who don't know what IPFS is, it's a decentralized file system essentially. And you can create your own little network of IPFS nodes and have your file system replicated across those. So that's quite cool. And then eventually one of the options for your file storage will also be our own decentralized file system. I see Colin, you're about to jump in. Did you have something to add to this?
No, I'm just my camera. Sorry.
Our own decentralized LLD. So which that's going to be coming, I think probably with Obsidian, is when we start doing offering storage through the Nexus network directly, and you'll have nodes on the Nexus network who will be offering up their own storage, and you'll be able to store your file systems decentralized through on those nodes, very much like Filecoin has been doing. And Filecoin is IPFS based as well. They haven't released theirs yet, I don't think. They're about to release Filecoin, and that's and you pay for storage, which if you're not going to be hosting your storage yourself and it's going to be going through the Nexus network, then there's going to be some gamification there, so people who are hosting that data will get paid for it essentially, exactly like Filecoin are doing. Only it's a feature of our blockchain, not an entire blockchain. and Filecoin got $200+ million in ICO money to develop something which really they took IPFS and then just added a very straightforward tokenomics on top of it so that people can get paid for storage. God knows what they've been doing for the last 2 years and $200 million. But anyway, that's besides the point.
One thing too, I mean, we're kind of of the opinion that these networks should be capable of more than just a speciality, right? A lot of these ICOs, the model was based purely around, I'm going to create a project, I'm going to token, and I'm going to force you to pay for my services with the token, right? And I think you're going to have an incredible amount of liquidity issues. And Filecoin is also doing some weird mint where you like pay to the network and then it mints out through the block and all this. I mean, it's a symptom of overcomplicated architecture, which shows that I think they know how to do it. They don't really know how to do blockchain stuff too well. So this LOD file system, instead of being kind of like a pay-to-work situation, it's going to be a type of peer-to-peer contract with reputation. And so people will basically build up a reputation as a good host of files. And then that creates a higher selection bias. So your reputation, kind of like staking, which gives you a higher return. And in the file system, it's actually going to give you more availability. So you can fill your hard drive up more and have more of that. And then the file system, right, is an extension, right, or extended into the satellites. So the satellites are going to be a physical hardware storage mechanism, which you can enter into these peer-to-peer type contracts. So we're doing it a lot in a way that I think is going to work a lot more effectively, and it's also tied in with our smart contract and DApp framework, so that a regular DApp developer, instead of having to host these files on their logical layer, they can just load them right up into the API and then take care of the rest for them. They'll just be able to read and write files directly through the API. So it's going to be another for developers to utilize, but we think it's going to work a lot more with Filecoins. We still have yet to see how Filecoin performs, but from just our basic assessment of the architecture, I think that they have gone a little bit more complicated than they need to. Ethereum's another one of those too. It's a bit overcomplicated, and generally from my experience as a developer, when it's overcomplicated code, it's generally a symptom of you not fully understanding everything. The simplest, most elegant solutions generally become the most powerful. So yeah, that just is an extension of this file system. Basically, the API will allow you to do this local remote IPFS, satellite, stuff like that. So the first initial one is going to be a local storage, and then we're going to start plugging in all these other types of file systems so that developers will basically, it'll become kind of like an interface or a common interface for anyone to interact with the rest of the types of file systems, which again, when I was talking about the kernel space and then Nexus kind of being this entry point to it, the kernel is going to have to talk to Nexus to get to the user, and the user is going to have to talk to Nexus to get to the kernel. The file system will kind of sit on that too, so that you're going to have to run through Nexus to access your file system and stuff like that. So that's just going to create a lot more of the security properties of it all. Sorry to interrupt, but I just thought I'd drop that in, Paul.
No, that's fine. That's good. So yeah, there's a few other features in the file API as well. So it's just, files are going to be encrypted using a key that will essentially be stored on chain in your crypto object register, but that key itself will be encrypted using your signature chain. So that means that if you are using, and this is where it's very cool, if you are going to be using IPFS or the LLD, so that all of your file data is stored in a completely decentralized manner, you will never have to store anything locally. And when you think about the what that means for the LLL OS and allowing you to have an operating system that you can fire up anywhere, log in, have it pull all of your data that you have previously stored from a decentralized location, you end up with this very cool, completely decentralized operating system. Anyway, that's slight aside. I just wanted to see what else was in the file API that's worth talking about. Probably not too much. It's going to have concept of directories of.
To you too, Paul. You got one from Tote in your chat.
Have we looked at sea of storage solutions? No, I haven't. I know. Yeah, there's a few that are using IPFS. Um, the I know that there are other projects out there that are going to be using IPFS based file storage. We're not the first to do that, but we need to do it in such a way that it works natively with Nexus, because it's going to be, rather than trying to integrate with another chain to do that, because it's so fundamental to the LLL OS that it's not going to be worth us trying to integrate with somebody who's already invented that wheel.
It says it's for blockchain, I guess. Saya.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we're basically designing it as a type of modular file system, modular storage mechanism. So, I mean, us personally, we're going to focus on doing IPFS, LED file system, and local and remote storage. If you have like your server and stuff like that. But you know, any other developer can implement it. We're going to make it really easy to drop in a new type of storage mechanism. You basically just plug that in via the API. It's just going to push it somewhere else and then wait for that response. So, I mean, having any other types of storage mechanisms implemented through the file system API should be fairly trivial. We're kind of tapping the ones that we personally do. We're focusing mainly on our file system, more so than making every other file system work for it. The LED file system is an important prerequisite for the satellites as well. So, I mean, we're pretty much local, remote, LED file system, and then potentially IPFS is really, and I mean, correct me if you think anything differently, Paul, but that's pretty much what we've been focusing on. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the file API. The two other big features that are coming that I've been working on the designs for. The first is a pretty major architectural change to the way that our API works. At the moment, it's a one-hit thing. So if you want to send some Nexus, you call one method, that this finance debit account, and you pass on all the information that you need to be able to perform that action, and it creates a transaction, and it either succeeds or it doesn't. But it's one API method that's responsible for creating that transaction, and that model's been fine so far. But we need to change that. We're going to still allow it to be used that way, but we want the ability to be able to call multiple API methods to build up a transaction with maybe several contracts in it. So, for example, I might be able to do something like debit one account, debit another account, create an asset, whatever it is, and do them all in one transaction. I mean, each of those actions is their own contract, and I may need the ability to call multiple API methods and build up a transaction over time. And one of the main reasons to do this is the way that we are designing Nexus with our contract conditions is we want to be able to have like off-the-shelf contract conditions that you can apply to any one of your contracts. For example, right now when you do a debit, you can just set an expiry equals flag, and that will behind the scenes create a particular type of contract condition to add an expiry to that debit. Well, what about if I want to add an expiry to some other kind of transaction that I'm doing? Rather than having to implement the expiry parameter again for every API method, what about if we just had an API method that adds an expiry to a contract? And so then I can build up my transaction with all these different contract conditions that we will expose to you, and so that's sort of the first phase. And then when we get into augmented contracts and wanting to be able to allow developers to get into the nitty-gritty and develop their own contract conditions and have those applied to things like a debit or an asset transfer or things like that, then we need the ability to be able to build up a transaction over time. So it's almost like a transactional transaction. So what that means is we will allow a developer to start a new transaction and then every API method they call after that will just add to or change this transaction that is being built up over time. And then when they're finished with it, they can then have that, sign it and submit that to the network. So
Yeah, add to that really quick as a part of this. I mean, this goes into our whole template contracts and then the contract standards. So right now, the standards are hard coded. Same with object register standards. I know some people have talked about, are we going to do an IF type situation? Right now, we actually have a very basic standardization process for our object register and new template contracts. But essentially, from the GUI level, what we want the end result to be, or close to end result, is you'll be able to basically, when you send the transaction, you'll have another little drop-down box, like you see with the operations, which will, the contract, and you could say reversible or yada yada yada. And down the road, it'll show them code for the contract. So you'll be able to select the standard contract and say, oh, I want it to be reversible, or I want this one to be immutable, or I want this to change, or I want to require this, that, or that. And then that's going to overall improve contract security, and with augmented contracts as well. They'll just be basic templates. So for the beginning phase, we're going to have to hard, but eventually we get deeper into the DAO, we will use standards to be stored as an object register or a state register. And I create the contract, I store it in the state register, and then I submit it to the DAO or the DAO, let's call it, the developer voting. Developers will go through the standard process and accept or reject that contract as a standard. And then Nexus will dynamically update it without having to have the code loaded in. And that's the same type of thing we're going to be doing with constants, like the block size and things like that. Right now, you have to actually upgrade the entire network and upgrade all the code, and everybody has to update their nodes because the state of these hard-coded values is actually in the source code. When we get to more of our final down the road, which is probably going to be late Tritium++, you'll just be able to standardize and read this dynamically. So Nexus will be able to almost bootstrap itself. You'll have your initial hard-coded values when you first start up your node, but once you sync the node up, it's going to gain all of the updates to those values, and those will be system registers, right? The system registers are going to require a certain type of consensus to update, so that we will, in the future, be able to have actual working group meetings that culminate in a vote for that working group that then, becomes a part of the condition for that contract to be considered an actual valid standard, so that the standards can dynamically exist on Nexus and we won't have to constantly upgrade the code in order to do that. So our initial standards are really just going to be operations, and which will be template contracts, and registers. Object registers are going to be our two initial standards, but it's going to grow out from there. API standards can be improved too. I just wanted to kind of add that in while you're on the subject, Paul.
Yeah, so I think that covers the transactions. The last feature, I'm really looking forward to working on this, but I haven't got started yet, is the DEX. So we've talked about our DEX for a while, and actually we have a DEX API. Not a lot of people know this, but we actually already have a DEX API where you can create buys and sells, but we don't talk about it because it's not finished. But we know it works, and that those contract conditions are already built into that. But what we don't have yet is any way to index all of those buys and sells. So this is a proper DEX, okay? So when a lot of people, when they talk about a DEX, what they actually are talking about is swaps, which is not quite the same thing, okay? So a swap is where somebody says, hey, I've got, whatever, 10 Nexus, and I want to swap it for 10 ABC coins. And somebody else can only do the opposite swap if they also have 10 ABC coins and they want 10 Nexus, right? Which is, you need to have that, you're basically just swapping one for another. So, and that can be done on different chains even, but that's a swap. With a DEX and a non-custodial DEX, which is the way that we're doing it, you are basically sending a transaction or creating a transaction that says, I'm going to send Nexus to whoever wants to claim it but these are the conditions that must be met in order for them to claim it. And that condition would be, for example, I'm going to send 10 Nexus out to the network, and somebody can claim those 10 Nexus as long as they've paid 10 ABC coins to my specific address. And the flip side of that is that they can, the person can only claim those once they've done that that transfer. So it's a completely non-custodial decentralized exchange, and we have all that plumbing in place. We actually have the API there already, but what's missing is somewhere where you can see all of the orders, all of the essentially all of the orders by market, to show, well, somebody is selling 10 Nexus at this price, or they're selling 10 ABC coins at this price, or even for non-fungible tokens or assets, they're selling a particular asset at a particular price. It doesn't have to be a currency style exchange. You can sell whatever you want on there. So what we need to develop is essentially the order matching system. So some way to index all of those transactions by market pair, so that people can then and then build an API that hangs off of that. So then you can start charting these things and showing an order book and having what looks like, an exchange interface, what something like you'd be used to seeing, but actually having it hang over our decks. So yeah, we've been talking about how we designing that order matching system, essentially. Well, it's not even the order matching system, it's just the indexing system to be able to index all the transactions, so you're essentially showing your order book.
To add to another thing we're adding for Tritium++ right now, the DEX, when you have a wildcard transfer, you have to fulfill the entire order, right? If it's a 5,000 Nexus order, I have to fulfill and purchase that entire order. But centralized exchanges actually allow partial order fulfillment. So we already have a lot of partial stuff built in. So we're going to be making some slight modifications to the op validate to allow the validate to handle a partial value, which will basically give, part of our design requirements for the DEX is for it to not feel like a DEX. It's going to feel like a centralized exchange with, your bar charts and the speed and the processing and all of these features you're used to, such as I should be able to partially fulfill this order and everything else like that. And since everything clears in memory, you'll see it execute instantly. You'll have to obviously wait for a confirmation for the coins to actually clear, but you'll see the trade happen just like that. And the trades will be managed that way, so you won't get a race condition between two people because it'll propagate out into the network. So the DEX should feel when it's done like you're using Bittrex or Binance, and that's part of our design goals, because a lot of people stay away from DEXs because they have lack of liquidity, but I think they have lack of liquidity just because they're not very easy to use interfaces, and you have the one-to-one situation too. So if I put up an order, right, and I want to buy Bitcoin's worth of Nexus, but nobody's selling me a Bitcoin's worth or has a Bitcoin's worth on hand, my order is never going to be fulfilled, and I'm going to have to cancel that order. So partial fulfillment is really, really important. And that's like Kendall was saying with the mobile wallet, how we designed the mobile wallet to feel like your online bank. It has to be something consistent with what people are already used to. Log into my bank account. Oh, this is Nexus. Okay, it feels like it's a better bank, right? Where crypto, I think, is a little bit too far out over that way, where it's like, oh, what is this private key stuff and manage this and wallets and it's scary. So in the same sense with the centralized, exchanges, like they do have a very good user experience and a very good interface. And there's a lot of key things that are important that make it, high quality. With this DEX, we're going to embody all of those things, and we're looking at using like trading views, charting libraries and stuff. So it's going to be a really sexy bar chart, right? And allow you this partial order fulfillment, and it'll be really quick in order to execute, so that people that are normally used to using centralized exchanges, you'll just be able to download this DEX module into your wallet and search for your market and start trading. And it should feel just as good, if not better, than a centralized exchange, which is what I think we really need to get people, starting to be looking at. And one of our use cases that's going to be announced soon is actually going to be the very first market on this DEX. So that's kind of pushed the priority of the DEX up a little bit, which is also this use case, with that being, There's going to be a lot more more value than speculating the increase in this use case's tokens value. There's going to be a whole other real world valuation coming through it. So that should help also drive demand for the NXS token as well through the DEX. So as people are using the DEX more and more liquidity starts moving into that, that's going to drive more liquidity into the Nexus markets as well.
Yep. So yeah, kind of related to that, actually, I've got a question here yeah, Paul's going to investigate a USDT pairing on Binance so the project could look to build more volume. Has he got an update on this? Yes, I have, and no, they won't do it. Binance right now are trying to, you know how easily they add new pairs that are Ethereum based, that are DeFi based, that have huge amounts of volume. Well, yeah, they do that. But any pairing that's not native to Bitcoin, they're trying to kind of get rid of them if they're low volume, which is why they got rid of our Ethereum and USD pairings a while back. And they won't add them unless you're in, they did tell me, and it's something ridiculous, like the top 25% of their volume list for them to add a new pairing on request. We're not going to be anywhere near the top 25 or anytime soon, which is a shame. I know it's chicken and egg, but that, you know, you get more exposure and more volume if you do have those pairings, but you know, there's not much.
That's why we're focused a lot on use cases the last few months too, because as I was saying, what really drives this network effect, what really creates, you know, these new ecosystems is basically real world value, right? So each one of our use cases that we're focusing on really has a fundamental real world value that they're going to produce, and they're going to bring in new users, right? New people that haven't used crypto before, that are, you know, stayed away or whatever, which is ultimately going to bring in more liquidity into Nexus, more volume, right? One of the other ways besides just adding to exchanges is building usage of the Nexus token, right? Beyond just using it to pay for things, you know, it's going to be something that's going to be the driving currency for the DEX. So as more of these tokens start launching on the DEX and they start producing a lot of real world value, which will explain exactly how we've done it and how we're doing it, where these tokens will be more than just a utility or something you use to pay for something on the platform. They're actually, it's really cool. I don't want to talk too much of it right now, but that's really fundamental too. So if you guys have been concerned about the liquidity and stuff as well, we have at least 3 use cases right now that are going to be driving a lot, like, you know, they're pretty close to coming to light, that I think will be bringing a lot of real world value in. And like I said, new users. The crypto industry right now kind of tends to recycle users. You know, I'm the Ethereum killer today, and I'm the Tron killer, and I'm the EOS killer. You know, I mean, it's just saying that is just like a recycling the same people. Like, yeah, you know, you're not bringing any new people into crypto, and it's Bitcoin that brought new people into crypto, which is why it's the king, right? And that's why Ethereum will never pass Bitcoin, because it hasn't brought as many new people into the industry as Bitcoin has, right? It hasn't really done a good job of producing real world value. It's all really speculative. And like I said, recycling the same users over and over again. So to add to that liquidity thing, that's, you know, we have a lot of multiple prongs that we're focusing on to improve the liquidity. You know, along with, you know, the ambassadors will discuss some things with you on their call to discuss what they're doing externally, but us as developers internally developing use cases is really important. And one of the use cases is going to bring a lot of potential value in a market that's totally untapped by crypto, which is an extremely high volume market. So we are reaching out to, you know, other people and exchange partners and stuff to be accommodating some of that, which that's also going to be another thing that brings in a lot of liquidity too. Liquidity comes from just usage of the currency, and, you know, having it added to other exchanges or getting more trading pairs kind of works, but it in a way splits your liquidity up a little bit more without bringing in new users as much. So, I mean, we think, or at least from what we've assessed, I think some of these other pursuits are going to be a lot more fruitful than just getting another Tether pair or something like that, which will lead, since it's the chicken and the egg problem, you know, that's why we focus on real world value, real things that people can really use it for, where I'm using this platform and it's valuable in my life. And it just happens to have a cryptocurrency associated with it, which drives more people into the crypto, right? And, you know, if they want to get involved in these specific projects, they're going to have to go through Nexus first, right? Which is just going to increase the overall liquidity. So that should help with the chicken and the egg problem as well.
Yep. Okay, I had one other question that was thrown to me on Slack, which was to do with multi-user staking. How much impact of an impact on memory and processor will multi-user staking have on a single node? Actually fairly low. So logging into a signature chain doesn't require a huge amount of memory. We do a bit of caching of your signature chain in memory, but we're talking megabytes at most. That's nothing. And the actual staking process is low power. It doesn't use a lot. It basically sits there most of the time idle, not really doing a lot, and then checking to see whether it's made the right calculation. And if it hasn't, it'll then just go off and sit around for a little while, twiddling its thumbs until the next time it checks. It does not use a lot, which is why when you're staking, you don't see your processor sat there doing 100%. It's doing very little amount of work in the background. I don't think we've at the point yet where we've been able to test how many users you can have multi-staking, but I would expect it to be lots if you needed to, hundreds.
Maximum SIG chain, like a fully loaded one, I think 500 nonces per second is what I set it at, or 1,000 nonces per second is I think I would have set as the maximum value. And my processor just doing SK hashing, I think is, I think it was close to a mega hash per second. I think you can do almost 1 million hashes per second. So theoretically, on a single thread, I suspect you could pretty comfortably stake up to 100 people on one with, it would be using some of your CPU. You'd probably end up with like 10 or 15% CPU usage. But I mean, theoretically, you can load things up quite significantly. I mean, since everything right now is really low footprint, like this new LOD update too, I mean, the memory now dropped from 120 megabytes to 64 megabytes, right? Like I wiped out all of these extra memory requirements. So like we already have such a teeny footprint that there's a lot of room to grow, which means there's a lot that can be done on it. And since every process doesn't take many resources anyhow, I mean, I suspect we'll definitely at least be able to support 50 to 100, people multi-staking on the same node. But it also depends on your Argon. And I mean, when a new block is created, everybody's got to create a new producer transaction and stuff like that. So that may have a little bit of delay too. But for the most part, it's light enough that you shouldn't notice any problems. And if you need to do more people or whatever, it's going to take a bit more of your CPU's resources. But I don't think it's going to really tap your computer out like mining would be. I mean, even up to I'd say even 1,000 people potentially. But again, we don't have that data specifically, but that's just kind of off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm expecting it to be fairly low. And I think the most common use case for multi-user staking is going to be just where you've got a handful of signature chains that you look after for family members or things like that. And, most people probably only have 2 or 3 or 4 on a node. I suppose there is one potential use case where somebody could create a centralized staking node that people can connect the mobile wallet app to, and have staking done there. But I wouldn't.
That's really so dangerous. That's so dangerous because it's basically like an exchange, right? They have access to all your money, right? When you're logging into someone else's node, like the way the software is designed, they aren't going to directly be able to access those credentials. It still is non-custodial because everything's encrypted, but they could modify the node in order to decrypt and find that information along the way, right? Unless we make the API lock like a username and do an SSL session based off of the username and that key, we could potentially actually make it fairly safe if we just make, you authenticate with, instead of a CA, we authenticate off the crypto object register off of the user that's logged in. So before you log in, you could require a certificate from that login, to be executed. And then you could, for the most part, protect against that. But I mean, like I said, still somebody could modify that code out since the API layer isn't enforced globally. It's just your API on that specific node. There would be no way for you to really know that was happening or not. So like we would just definitely recommend you not to connect to an untrusted node, not to connect to anything other than a node that you manage and log in on that, just to protect your credentials. I have a question from Ryan. If we want to change our keys to Falcon, we need a new SIG chain and lose our current stake keys? No. If you want to switch to Falcon, do you want to answer that, Paul?
Yeah, I do, because the answer is changing, right? So currently, to switch to Falcon, you set something in your config file, and then the next time you make a transaction, it will make the switch to Falcon. It's not a particularly nice way to do it. We're actually we have made a new API method in the crypto API, which will be coming out in the next hard fork, where you can either type it into your command line, or we'll probably even add a switch into the desktop wallet, where you can just switch from EC key to Falcon. And the difference is that when you do it via the config file, it won't change you to Falcon until you make your next transaction. Whereas doing it via the CLI, we'll do it instantly. And at the same time, we'll re-encode all of the keys that are in your crypto object register. So we'll switch those over to Falcon as well. So we really don't want to be doing it the way we're currently doing it via the config file, and it may even cause us.
That was just a quick and dirty way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to make it super easy. In fact, I'm going to add a note now to add that into the desktop wallet. That would be really nice, just to be able to have a slider.
Yes. Falcon, yeah, on your users, like, choose your crypto type. And I mean, we're supporting Brainpool and Falcon right now, but we're probably going to start supporting other types of keys like Edwards 25519 curve, potentially SECP 256K1, like Bitcoin keys. Just a couple other ones so that people can select, different secure channels. I mean, it really, ultimately speaking, I mean, your public keys don't really matter much anymore with signature chains, since they're really just disposable. I mean, the security of public key cryptography comes from, I can have this public key exposed to the world, and there's no feasible way they can find my private key from that. We completely don't even expose that public key for until you actually generate the transaction. And once that transaction is generated, it's out on the network. Anybody, even if they were able to crack that key and re-sign a conflict, it's going to create a conflict in the mempool, and that conflict of transaction is never even going to make it out, right? So, I mean, you could theoretically use like really, really weak keys with a signature chain, and it will still stay secure. But not to say that you should, but just each of these keys, just think of it as like, the signature chain is where a lot of the core of the security comes from. And then, the key type that you use adds additional security, but the system does not rely on security, really. Like a lot of the security reliance comes from SHA-3. We rely on hashing a lot more. And that's another way we've been able to produce quantum resistance, even if you do happen to use EPC. Because if you just have a secure authenticated SSL connection, which we're also looking, we're implementing MIC-lease and other post-quantum actual encryption schemes that we're going to support in the crypto API as well. So for people that want to actually work with post-quantum encryption beyond just the public key systems too, they'll be able to start working with that. But yeah, just think of these keys as ephemeral, and they're disposed of as soon as they're used. And Falcon is extremely secure, so you have this really small window of time of like about sub-second time to attack that key. Is really the only time that you have. It really depends on network latency, like how quickly the other transactions are propagated. So,
Yeah, I had a lengthy argument on Twitter. I hate Twitter. I really do.
Oh, did you get in with that quantum resistant guy?
Yeah, I got encouraged to.
So retarded, man. Like he was arguing with me, telling me like integers factoring is what our problem is. I'm like, dude, that's RSA, man. I'm like, did you? I don't know. The fudders, the QRL people are still fudding, but like I straightened him out because I just like put a nail in the coffin with it, and like he just ended up looking like a complete idiot. And I'm like, why am I arguing with this idiot anymore? But like.
So I've been encouraged to get back on Twitter a bit more because I stopped doing it after just having an ugly experience with it last year. And So I started getting a bit, and pretty much my first foray back into commenting on things, I got pulled into that argument with the QRL guys, and I gave up because they won't accept anything that can be quantum resistant that isn't from a mathematical point of view. They won't accept that you can protect yourselves in other ways than just having a key that cannot be cracked. So the argument was that we're saying that you only have a very, very tiny window to work on the public key that we've exposed. And they said, well, there's other ways that you can do that. You can create a man in the middle of attack by doing this and this and this, and we can crack SSL, and we can do this to slow down your network. And there's all these different things that they would have to put in place in order to give themselves that window of time. And even then, that window of time is—
You're not even right though, because using Michaelis, right, like over the Tritium protocol, like that's where I shut him down. I just completely shut him down. I'm like, dude, you have no idea if you what SSL was created to protect against man-in-the-middle attacks. They're like, well, but yeah, but you can still do ARP spoofing. And I'm like, we authenticate every connection with the user's signature before they actually are able to send transactional data. ARP spoofing doesn't work. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, your legacy transactions still use, ECC 571R1. I'm like, our legacy transactions are a pay to public key hash, and we rely on SHA-3 as our security mechanism, not ECC, right? We're not relying on the discrete logarithmic problem. If our security model was based around the discrete logarithmic problem, yeah, we're not quantum resistant, but we rely on Michaelis, SHA-3, and Falcon. And then we only support ECC just as a temporary default right now because it's a little bit smaller. It's a lot smaller than Falcon, right? So it scales a little bit better, but Falcon also, and once, I want to finish this signature pruning system for this next update, which basically is going to allow you to only keep a few signatures on disk for your signature chain. So, I mean, you could have 100,000 transactions and only really need to keep 2 or 3 of the signatures on that, which is a massive savings in disk space, which is one thing I wanted to put in before we enable Falcon by default. And I also, Falcon is just, since it's still being assessed, I wanted to just make sure that we don't fully rely on it until, but they were actually arguing with me saying that since NIST hasn't created a quantum standard, that there's no such thing as quantum resistant, and that therefore, like, we're not quantum resistant because like the standards haven't. I'm like, quantum resistance means that there's no known post-quantum attacks on the crypto system, and standards is a totally different thing. It has nothing to do. You can't say that there's no post-quantum cryptography just because NIST hasn't standardized it, right? It's like, dude, they just, I mean, I got into it yesterday too. Like, I mean, they're trying to nitpick at any little thing, but they're complete idiots, right? They have no, like, this guy literally tried to tell me that ECC uses integer factorization problem, dude. Like, I mean, dude, this is like fucking moron, pardon my language, right? And so, I mean, it's only because the QRL guys are just like, whatever. So, I mean, if any of them, like, you pull back, like, that's what he said, is that there's no standards. There's no standards. I mean, I was just like, well, you just contradicted yourself, man, because you're supporting XMSS with QRL and saying it's post-quantum, but like, wait, I thought that post-quantum cryptography doesn't exist now because, like, you say there's no standards, right? Yep. Yeah, so be careful when you're arguing with those idiots. Like, their cognitive dissonance is like pretty through the roof. The last Twitter one debate I got on it, like, I shut him down. Like, he actually got to the point where he's like, well, yeah, well, what about you're just not using a standard technology, and so therefore you're not quantum resistant. Ha ha, you're not quantum resistant. Ha ha. And I'm just like, dude, the guy was acting like a complete idiot. I'm like, dude, you're further reinforcing how misinformed you are in this entire debate. Like, yeah, it's crazy.
I didn't really understand why they feel so passionately about, bagging on us. I mean, we're not going out of our way to bag on them. They've got some good...
well, it is. It's in 2017, QRL launched, and they were shitting on us. They were attacking us. And I went and I looked in, and they were just an ERC20 token, and they were walking around claiming to be the world's first quantum-resistant blockchain. And I said, it's utterly irresponsible to use unproven cryptography in a production application, ICO, and then call it quantum resistant. And after that tweet is when QRL, like they took a dump after that. And so they just hated us since then. Like, cause they're just every possible way trying to attack us. Because like I called them out on their BS back then. They were claiming to be the world's first quantum resistant blockchain. I'm like, no, you're an ERC20 token. I'm sorry, but like you're not quantum resistant. You don't have a blockchain. So yeah.
Anyway, okay. I think that's kind of all from me. I'm sure people are keen to know when Tritium Plus Plus and Mobile Wallet and all those things are coming out. I'm not going to give you any dates, but we're firming stuff up for the first of the Tritium Plus Plus hard forks. We want that out fairly soon. As Kendall alluded to earlier, we need that done before we can get the mobile wallet out. And it's not they go hand in hand. We actually need it out beforehand so that we can go through the certification.
Well, technically, we don't. We just have to upgrade. I mean, I could just upgrade my seed nodes, and that should be enough.
Yeah.
I mean, we just need to upgrade the main seed nodes beforehand with the new network protocol stuff. So we could push the mobile wallet out earlier, and it's not going to kill us. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. It's just going to put a little more strain on the mobile nodes, but you won't necessarily have as decentralized of a topology until that update's fully released. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no, it's fine. But you know, I hate the word soon. I don't want to say soon. Yeah, there's no big features that need to be done before the next Tritium Plus Plus released. We're just closing off all the other stuff.
Yeah, we're wrapping everything up. I think we're code cut off early October, which is like no more. I mean, we've been out of feature development. I mean, I'm doing a lot of scaling stuff, but we're really just kind of locking it in then to make sure we're wrapping and we're testing and everything like that. And then I wanted to give an update too. People have been asking about the voting app. Now Chuck Williams was supposed to be working on it at a point, but he ended up getting involved in some other things. So we've actually, we'll introduce her, Amanda. She's been actually getting involved on the web stuff. She's helping develop that right now. And actually she's doing a really good job. She's doing it with Bubble. I just saw a video of it. It's looking really awesome. So like, I think I see you there, Amanda, like awesome. And I think on the ambassador call, she might be able to give you guys like a little update. She did do you want to say something, or I'm going to ask you to unmute if you want to say hi, Amanda.
Great, you put her on the spot.
Hi,
That's
how
pretty.
are you?
Yeah, there she is. All right, cool. Let's see. So I don't know what the hand means. What is that? Oh, is the hand like unmute them or something? Raising your hand. Anyway.
So what's happening with the app at the moment then? Is it
You want to say something on that, Amanda, or do you want me to continue?
I think okay, cool. My mic is unmuted for a second. I remuted myself.
Okay.
Sorry about that. No, right now, technically, it is pretty much all set, I believe. Like you said, Colin, I sent a little video to you guys kind of testing it out. And right now I am focusing on the UI for it. Bubble's been a great app to work with where it will do the automatic scaling for multiple sizes of mobile and the web desktop setup. So I've just been kind of playing around with that to make it as friendly as possible so that it looks the best on both mobile, iPad, smaller screens, larger screens, but it's looking pretty good and I'm excited to let everyone see it when it gets released. I've been super excited and have been so excited to talk about it, and I'm glad that I get to show everyone soon.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
pretty good to hear that somebody's using Bubble and liking it, and I think it's been pretty useful to have that Bubble plugin and to get people to.
On the note too earlier where you said we need to improve the documentation stuff, one of the use cases which is coming out now, who's the guy that actually discovered Bubble, he's writing node setup documentation from a layman, like not ever set up nodes, never run putty before in his life. And he's doing a really good job on that too. So when, as these things start coming out more, like, and we get his app moving to production, there should be a lot better documentation. He's the one that actually wrote the bubble documentation. He's done a really amazing job. We really appreciate a lot of the work that he's done, and we're really excited for you guys to see his project too. That's other people in crypto are just, I think Consensus and Ethereum are just starting to like think about, oh wait, maybe we should do this. Like we're already like way far along with it, and he's got lots of connections. The platform's built, it's done. I think we're launching pretty soon. And it's a really powerful concept. It does a lot of good for the world, but it's also going to bring a lot of liquidity into Nexus too. So that's something really exciting. We hope, we're excited for you guys to find out about that.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Every time I look at that app, I'm like, that's just so cool that it's done and it works and it's finished. Anyway, we shouldn't talk too much about that.
Yeah, we'll let him announce it.
Back to Bubble for a second though. There's been a pretty half a dozen people who've messaged me just asking me how they get started with Bubble, and it's great that Mike, that guy's going to be doing that documentation. But there's just a few things, a few tricks to help you with the Nexus integration. You know, where you should store the session ID when it comes back in your login response and things like that, because then it's available to you down the track. And it's those types of things that I know I've said them over and over again to each person. So I'd like to just document that. I actually wrote a little test app that is just a simple little Nexus-based test app that allows you to log in and view an account, allows you to view some transaction info and node info and stuff like that. I built that in Bubble just to demonstrate how easily it is to use the plugin. And I wanted to have that published on Bubble's marketplace as a template so other people can then just download it. Unfortunately, Bubble won't allow it onto their marketplace as a template because it's a test app. They have some pretty strict requirements on what they allow you, what they accept as a template. But I have that app, and anyone who wants to get started on Bubble, what I can do is copy that app and then transfer it to their account. And I've done that with a couple of people, including Amanda, actually, just so they can get to see how I structured the integration with the Nexus plugin. And it's actually really easy, but it's just nice to have a functioning demo that you can then just pick apart and try with. So if anyone wants to use Bubble, I can make a copy of that test app, transfer it to your account. You just need to send me your email address that you use for Bubble, and you can start playing with it. And that's me done. We've been on here for over 2 hours.
We were thinking like we haven't done as much coding this quarter because we've been doing like architecture and use cases and operating systems. And like, I mean, I've been working with like Victor with Cisco and the routing and the security guys. And all that. Like, it's just been so much stuff going on. But we were like, okay, well, like we don't have any demos to show so much as Kendall, you know? We were like, okay, let's see how this goes. And it ended up being our longest one.
Like the number of instant messages I get now every single day, it's just going up and up and up. And I've actually had to tell people, if they want to get hold of me, don't instant message me here, do it here and in this way, because otherwise they get lost.
That's where I'm at too, man. Everything's muted except for Signal. That's the only, like, people know, like,
really? Right, noted.
Yeah, that's dude.
I get hold of you.
Respond on Slack, dude. That's been muted for a long time, man. Like, so yeah, I mean, this is signs of like good. You know, I mean, these are good things, right? Like, I mean, Nexus is growing, the number of accounts is growing, the use cases are growing. Like, I mean, more people are getting involved. I mean, our notifications are going up. Like, I mean, it's good signs, right? And like, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's not like Nexus is going to be an overnight success, right? I mean, if you remember Bitcoin, right? Like it took a number of years for it to really kind of grow. And it was really Silk Road that brought Bitcoin to the forefront when Ross Ulbricht actually got busted in late 2013 is when everyone was like, Bitcoin? What's this Bitcoin thing, right? And that really was a huge explosion. So, I mean, we're modeling kind of our growth in community and ecosystem off of, I guess, the proven model of Bitcoin's network effect before it kind of started losing that. So, you know, just for people to understand our higher level strategies, we're building it, you know, grassroots, bottom up, community driven, and really harnessing that power of the network effect, which is, You know, like I said, the reason Tron and all of these, yeah, they're successes, right? But they're never going to move very much. Ripple's never going to move very much. Ethereum's going to not really move too much either because, you know, it's backed by JP Morgan Chase. They've got all these big companies using it. Everyone's like, la, right? But that only goes so far, right? Same with their tech stack. It will only take them so far. And I think a lot of them are like pretty close to topped out, you know, like, I mean, Justin Sun can make up as many BS things as you want, you know, but he forgets how many people are in the world. I think he posted a tweet about 10 billion people are using Tron now and stuff like, it's just, this stuff catches up to you, man. And like their marketing tactics are based off of people's unconsciousness, right? We're not trying to take advantage of people's unconsciousness. We're helping people become more conscious and more empowered, right? And these things do take time, but like once this, I mean, the snowball is going. It's just a smaller snowball right now, but I mean, you know, snowballs they get bigger. I mean, it's moving. Like, especially compared to a couple of years ago, 1 year ago, even like the snowball is moving. So we're definitely going in the right direction. I think like, you know, we're heading towards, you know, really, really awesome future. And I think we really have a chance of making that impact that Bitcoin set out to do, right? That it was supposed to do. And like I said, a lot of the people that I've been seeing getting involved in Nexus, even more recently, are a lot of old Bitcoin OGs, right? People that got into Bitcoin for the libertarian principles, for the freedom, for the self-empowerment. And now a lot of them have just, you know, Bitcoin has not delivered on the promise that it said. And a lot of the, you know, old Ethereum people that had these great ideas for these really awesome dApps when, you know, Ethereum was first out and they did their ICOs and everything, to come to realize that Ethereum could not do it. Ethereum could not complete what they needed it to do. And so all the smart people, right? All the smart people are not using Ethereum. All the smart people aren't using Bitcoin. They're waiting for the right ones, right? And we've actually been fairly successful at finding those people, or they found us, right? And each of them are developing like a different type of dApp or app and different sectors, right? That they haven't really touched the blockchain yet because they just haven't seen it as ready. But as they've seen our tech stack, they've gotten really, really excited about it. So like for those that don't know, like, you know, I mean, we're not focused on just getting all these recycled DeFi crappy dApps to move over and stuff like that. No, we've been targeting the people that, you know, were a little bit disenchanted by, you know, Ethereum or blockchain after, you know, the promise of it wasn't ever delivered. And then we've been able to reignite that passion and they've been seeing what we've been building. So everything's definitely moving in the right direction. I mean, there's obviously ups and downs and we all have our challenges and struggles every day, but for the higher level, like view of everything, it's going in the right direction. We got lots of cool people. We're really grateful for Amanda. She's a new intern. She just graduated college and she's coming in. She's actually she's the daughter of somebody from the community that's been around for a long time too, which is really cool. I don't know if I'll mention names because I don't know how much privacy wants Amanda, but it's really cool. So we've been really grateful to have Amanda getting involved too. And the ambassador call, I think, will be really good for you guys. They're getting their whole plan formalized. So they told me like next month is when they're planning on doing it. So just start expecting that we have the developer call, right? Which is the developer, the development, the inward, the yin, the womb, right? We're the developers. We're building the body. We're building all this tech. And then the ambassadors are the direction, like the father or the mother, right? And so they're going to be basically starting to have more of their Zooms publicly and getting a better feedback from you guys. And so like it's moving in the right direction. And yeah, we thank you everybody for sticking with it. Thank you, Neil Hellman. He's been helping write new, what's it called, guides, which has been really awesome. Matote, he's been really driving the DeFi working group forward. So if you're interested in that, I'd definitely go hang out with Matote. He's a really bright guy, brings a lot of really great perspectives to the table. He was involved with the Maker DAO as well. So he's seen a lot of the DeFi DAO stuff, and I've seen a lot of the shortcomings in that. And, you know, he's working in this working group and, you know, with his crew to kind of help, you know, and make sure we don't make those shortcomings. April, thank you as always, Maid, for being involved. She's a key part of the ambassador working group. She really helps everything drive. Jaden, thank you very much too. You're always driving things forward, bringing new perspectives. Giddy Six, always, he's another one of the great ambassadors. He's always helping. Fluid Flows, amazing with the social media. Brian Anderson, definitely appreciate you. He's been doing a lot of the content, quarterly reports. Aries, she's been doing graphics, been really killing it. I just wanted to kind of give a shout out to all you guys, and obviously Jules, who's been driving a lot of the ambassador stuff forward. For a while, it was just kind of me and Jules doing ambassador stuff while we were building Tritium. So it's really cool. We appreciate everybody that's been getting involved. We appreciate everything everybody's been doing. And you know, thank you. Like in the times that it's at right now, like we need to, you know, hold together more than ever, right? And set that example of connection and what it means to be connected, and spreading that message of love and showing people that the world can actually function at a high capacity, right? With technology, with, you know, without all of these shortcomings that we believe we need, such as, you know, like corrupted, you know, political systems, and, you know, which we've just taken as for granted. Oh, that's just how the world is. No, the world does not need to be that way. And, you know, every day that we get further along in this pursuit, like that becomes more and more true. We can make this happen, and we are making this happen, right? So I just wanted to say that to all of you. And I wanted to just send my gratitude and say thank you, and thank you to Paul for killing it too, dude. Paul's getting really cool, dude. He's coming up with, like, I'm just like, oh wait, that's a great idea, Paul. I love it, dude. He's like, he came up with the whole like key encryption of the crypto object treasure. I was like, no, I don't know, man. It's just like, I was like overthinking. And he's like, oh, just do it.
It's coming up like 2 years, so I am due for a good idea, huh?
No, it's cool. Like, yeah, major props to Paul. He's been designing a lot of his own features now too, which is really cool. So it's like, and that's way better than it just being one person, right? Like, because you bounce ideas off of each other and everything. So like, major props to Paul. Like, everybody's is coming along really well. You guys are awesome. So wanted to just extend that out and say thank you to everybody. Is there any questions you guys have before we close? I think this has been 2.5 hours now. If you have any questions, just shoot me a message in the chat. Public testnet before hard fork. Yeah, I think we wanted to do a public pooled staking testnet iteration before the public hard fork. Yeah. Scott Simon's been doing it with Docker containers and stuff, but I think it would be wise to have at least 100 participants in the public testnet. So yeah, I think that is a good idea. I think we were planning on doing that anyway, but I think we'll formalize that with an absolutely certain yes. You will get public testnet, and potentially we can do beta testing of the mobile wallet maybe on that testnet at that time to run over the test network. We'll figure that out, or just running native on the public network. And then that is going to be a huge step that you're going to know, okay, once this public testnet phase is done, then it's just polishing before we're ready to release. Anyone else? Sweet. Well, this has been a lot better Zoom than I expected. This is why we don't have expectations, man. Again, thank you, everybody. It's been a great Zoom, and we look forward to the ambassador call soon, and we'll definitely keep you up to date with everything, especially once we start getting closer to our beta test cycles for the mobile wallet and the public test net for pooled staking. And then I will keep you guys up to date once I finally complete my LOD updates and what I've been working on there. And so that you guys can get a better idea of everything there. And we're going to be also working on, or I am anyway, like a better transparency processes to keep up with development, and like a spec document, like requirements, you know, like I'm starting to work on a bit more of the logistics associated with our standardization process. And I want to make that a bit more of a public standardization process of protocol adjustments and things like that. So that's another thing to keep your eye out for, is we're developing that and moving that forward too. All right. Well, I guess without further ado, I will get this uploaded to YouTube tonight. Thank you, S. Bizzle. Thank you, everybody. You guys are awesome. And peace and love.